So I have the very distinguished and dubious pleasure of introducing our 10th president, Dr. Todd Maxson. Hopefully I don't need these. I can take them off. We'll see. Better. Who's giving his presidential address this morning. Told him yesterday that he set the bar pretty high with Dr. Natrika's introduction, so I've had to really had to dig deeply into my past experiences with Dr. Maxson to come up with a fitting introduction. Kind of like Todd did yesterday with Dr. Tuggle. If you have ever had Todd come do a site visit or a consult, or you've worked with him, or you've been a reviewer with him, on a committee with him, or trained by him, please stand up. I got to imagine that there's a huge, and that's me too, I'm standing. Just want you to remember the impact he has had on pediatric trauma through that network. So one commonality I could think of between Dr. Maxson and myself is there were, now people think this is a bad term, but it's really not, okay? Where we live and where we're from, this is a badge of honor, okay? So you might be a redneck if you went to high school in Victoria, Texas, had to look that up. It's down in southeast Texas, kind of between Galveston and southeast of San Antonio, down in there somewhere. Your undergraduate to graduate training took you from College Station to Galveston to Little Rock and then Houston. It's a pretty good redneck pedigree right there. Your career started in Houston, then moved to Dallas and Austin, and finally back to Little Rock. Again, pretty good pedigree there. You ask another redneck 2 days before to introduce you for your PTS presidential address. And finally, you have a tattoo. Dr. Todd Maxson, my redneck trauma brother. I can't think of the first time we met or how long we've known each other, but it's been forever. Todd is an amazing individual, and amazing in that he's well-grounded in spite of all of his accomplishments. I'll list a few of them here. His CV is quite long. He has over 90 plus peer-reviewed publications. He basically, with the help, okay, so all you trauma program managers, I forgot to put this in here. Let me just state that I know for a fact that Todd did not do this himself, that there were trauma program managers involved. But he basically established 3 level 1 pediatric trauma centers, Dallas, Austin, and Little Rock. He established not just trauma centers, but a trauma system in the state of Arkansas. Is that 2011? Is that when that went through, Todd? Somewhere around there, yeah. I know Todd would make frequent trips over to see Dr. Tuggle, myself, and Dr. Albrecht because he was modeling that system a little bit based on what we had done in Oklahoma after the bombing and the tornadoes. So he was chair of the American College of Surgeons COT Verification Review Committee, a committee that at the time he was chair of was extremely volatile. There was a lot of politics and battling going on between trauma centers of various levels, and Todd quietly guided us through the storm, and things were better on the other side. And now he's 10th president of the Pediatric Trauma Society. He's also a Renaissance man. He likes the finer things in life. I'm not sure what you're seeing there or where you are on the big picture, but it looks very Renaissance to me. But he's also a family man. His wife Amy is here. His kids cannot be here. His daughter Marianne, Andrew, and Jake. He's been dedicated to his family the whole time. And that's important for us as trauma directors and centers and everything else, that we're grounded in that, because that's what makes us go to work every day That's what makes us strive to be better and better every day, and Todd has clearly done that. He's fiercely committed to his teams and his friends. Just had to put that in there with Wagner standing down there in his Ohio State gear, but anyway. It's Patrick and Lori there. They're here at the meeting. He's trained two people who, Patrick's already in a trauma leadership position, and whether Lori likes it or not, guess what? She's going to be soon, so, because I'm her boss. And so he's got lots of people out there that he's trained that do what we do, and that's a great thing. Even when they don't show up. That's him and Sam Smith wondering, which I would be the same. I mean, when we get into some of this laparoscopic stuff anymore, if the fellow's not there, man, I'm in trouble. So I get it. Dr. Gurian had to help me do my first laparoscopic duodenal atresia the other day. So anyway, Todd's a great guy. But when he needed them to show up, boy, did they. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's going to make me cry, but, everybody knows the story. I'm not going to go into it a whole lot. Lori pointed out to me on one of her talks, I didn't notice this before, but if you look at that monitor over there, there's a green number that says 115, and there's a purple number under there that says 77. His shock index was 1.6 when he hit the door. That's a pretty good index. That's a 25% or plus. You may not make it. The system that he built, amazingly, saved his life. Now, I do have one question, though. Do we have to modify the CRAFT score for in-hospital alcohol use? And also, was there an intervention performed? Because I forgot to ask about that when I did, where was Deidre? I forgot to ask about that when I did your site visit. So I should have used that picture to go. But, all joking aside, the adult trauma medical director who I knew very well, all of a sudden at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, I'm not on call. I'm getting a call from some Arkansas number saying Little Rock, and it's Ronnie saying Todd's been in a bad wreck. And I thought I'd lost my redneck brother that day, but I'm glad that he's so good that he built the system that I didn't. So that's fabulous. Now, that does call into question, though, Todd's sanity to some degree, because what does a redneck do after they survive a motorcycle crash? Well, of course, they take up flying. Another safe, we surgeons like to do these silly things, and so I'm sure Steve Smith had something to do with it somewhere along the way because of his affiliations and everything. But now Todd doesn't do motorcycles anymore. He does planes, and hopefully we don't have to hear anything more about that. Wait, did Letton say tattoo? So anyway, the last words a true redneck says are, hey, watch this. I guess this is kind of Clark Griswold getting ready to go get the family Christmas tree picture with the chainsaw and everything. I'm not sure if they're going to go clear the creek or whatever, but I've been watching Todd for a long time, and we've all benefited extremely a lot, our patients, us, our trauma centers, from what Todd has been able to accomplish. And it's a great honor for me to give him this quick introduction. I hope it wasn't too long or too painful, and that I look forward to his presidential address on The Disease Doesn't Cure Itself. Everybody please, Dr. Todd Maxson. Rednecks hug, they don't shake hands. Good. Love you, man.
So, several people have said, "Are you nervous about your talk?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm not at all nervous about the talk. I'm nervous about Bob." That is really what I can't tell you how much it means to be standing here, and it means even more to have such a great friend help. It means a lot to have Arkansas peeps. There you go, in the room. I appreciate that. So thank you, and good morning. I want to talk about four things. I'm going to talk about, it's a presidential address. There's sort of a formula to it. You have to talk about where we've been, where we are today, where we're going, and then, because I have the privilege of the podium, I'm going to give you some random musings. Where we've been, I will remind all of you that we are born from trauma. William Ladd had already started his career dabbling in pediatric surgery, but with the explosion on the Halifax in Nova Scotia, rededicated his life and to pediatric trauma. And so pediatric surgeon, the father of pediatric surgery, began as a pediatric trauma surgeon. That's how we began. Somehow, I think we got away from it. We kind of lost our way a little bit. But to know that this is in our DNA is helpful to me. And while it is true that all those that wander are not lost, I was. And I would never describe my path to this podium today as intentional or planned. I would use adjectives like haphazard and circuitous and happenstance and lucky. That's sort of the best I would say to it, because I actually really had no intention of being in a place like this today. I grew up, my mother was a nurse. That was sort of my interest in medicine. I worked for a couple of general surgeons in high school, college, and medical school. I was going to do that for a living. And then I got to Arkansas, and there was one pediatric surgeon in the state of Arkansas that worked 24/7. And he was a master. He was fearless. He was brave. He was technically perfect. He could move the patient under you and sort of make you believe that you could actually do an operation. And I thought, oh, that's gorgeous. That is just beautiful surgery. These congenital anomalies. And so changed gears from general surgery to pediatric surgery. Thought that's really what I want to do. So got a year off to do some research, because figured out somebody said, well, you got to do that. So did a year of research, and sort of got prepared and was kind of on this track, like I'm going to do pediatric surgery. I'm going to do pediatric surgery. And then I went back to the university hospital, and you did the trauma rotation. And I thought, oh, no, I'm wrong. This is awesome. This is the best. It's like Christmas every day. You run down to the trauma bay, you open up some little package. You don't know what's in it. I mean, this is the best, man. And it just totally fed into my, ADHD brain. And so I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. But I was about a fourth-year resident, and you sort of had to decide. And people were like, oh, well, you're clearly going to go do pediatric surgery. And so I kind of half-assed went and interviewed for pediatric surgery. I went and interviewed at about 8 places, which is about a third of what most people do. And damn, I ended up matching. And I remember I came to Amy's apartment. Amy and I were just dating, and I came to the apartment, and I brought a pair of boots, and I said, I have to go to Houston. And I said, I love you, and I'd really like for you to go with me, but you can't go because you don't have any boots. And so I'm gonna leave these boots, and if you keep the boots, I'll take that as a pretty good sign. And so next day she showed up in boots, and we headed to Houston. But I tell you, I was ambivalent about that. I really did it because pediatric surgery was sort of hard to do and hard to get into. And I thought, and we talked about it, I said, well, go do that. And if you don't like it, you can always switch and to go do trauma. They'll always let you go do trauma. Because you didn't do both at the time. This is 1996, and still you didn't do both. I ended up in Houston, and when you train in Houston, you are at Texas Children's and at Ben Taub, the county hospital, and you go over to the county hospital and it's poorly resourced. You don't have, I mean, it is really a low middle income world over there. And you look out the window and there's ostensibly one of the greatest hospitals in the world right there that you're looking at, and they don't do trauma. Nobody would come over and darken the door of this county hospital where these kids were coming in and living and dying every day. And it was just wrong. It was just wrong. And I knew it was wrong, and I started talking about it being wrong. But I was incredibly lucky because of who I was with. I was over at Ben Taub. Amy was working at Ben Taub, and we became great friends with Dr. Ken Maddox. Marty Schreiber was there. Amy was working with Marty in his lab. John Holcomb was there. The Joint Military Training Operation was there. It was really like Woodstock for a short period of time. There was like this incredible collection of amazing people, and they allowed us in. They allowed a pediatric surgeon in, and they said, "Here's the deal. You can do whatever you want. Why don't you do, they're a huge NICU there. Why don't you do all these NICU cases during the day? And then at night, why don't you just take call with us? Why don't you just fall in the call pool and do adult trauma, acute care surgery?" So we did that for a couple of years. And I have to say, it was the second most fun part of my professional career. And you two know exactly what the most fun part was. But the second most fun part of my professional career was getting to do that and getting to be around those amazing men and women that had dedicated their lives to trauma care, and now they sort of saw the benefit of having somebody that not only did trauma work, but actually was an expert in pediatric care too, and the marriage of those two things made us better. So just incredibly lucky, and I thought for the first time, maybe you can do both of these things. David Wesson had just shown up over at Texas Children's as the chief, and I went to him and I said, "David, we have to do this. Pediatric, you've done this in Canada, you've done this in New York. Pediatric people have to be engaged in this work. It is the number one thing that's killing kids, and we just can't morally call ourselves the protector of children, that we're going to dedicate our lives to children but not take care of the number one thing that's killing them. That's just not congruent." And David agreed. So we went to the then president of Baylor College of Medicine and Texas Children's Hospital, and we sat down in his oak conference room, and we pitched it. We'd like to be the first trauma center in this part of the world. There were great trauma centers in the Northeast. There was one in Cincinnati. There was one in Denver. There was nothing in between. In our redneck part of the world, there was nothing. And we said, we'd like to be the first one. And Dr. Feigen thought, and he said, no. He said, we don't need that element in our hospital. And I said, you mean injured kids? He goes, you know what I mean. And I said, I actually do know what you mean, sir. And you're wrong, but okay. And I remember getting up and leaving the room, turning to David, really sort of choked up with tears in my eyes. And I said, David, I have to leave. I have to leave Texas Children's. If they're not going to do this, I have to go somewhere that's going to do this. And he said, I understand. And our relationship even got better as he continued to mentor me through all that. But just happenstance, got a call from a guy named Brett Jawar, who was the chair of pediatrics at UT Southwestern in Dallas. And he said, I've heard you talk, and I've heard you talk about this, and we agree. We ought to be doing this at the Children's Hospital. We see a lot of trauma at Dallas. Why don't you come to Dallas and help us be the first trauma center? So I said, okay. Amy and I loaded up. We went to Dallas. We didn't recognize that you actually had to change Texas law in order for pediatric hospitals to be allowed to be designated as trauma centers. But over time, Deb Brown sort of guided me through that, and Dallas, Children's Medical Center Dallas became the first level 1 pediatric trauma center in the Southwest United States. That was where I met this amazing man that you all heard from yesterday, Ronnie Stewart, who was the chair of surgery in San Antonio. And Ronnie said, I believe in what you're doing. Come help us at the state level. Come sit on the Trauma Advisory Council. And so, again, fortuitous, lucky, circuitous, I just ended up sitting at his right elbow, listening and learning for several years about how to build consensus, how to bring in a coalition, and how to move an ideal forward to fruition. Incredibly fortunate to be able to help with that. We got the Children's Hospital in Dallas verified. We got it planed up, and it was running, and we had a succession planning in place. And then all of a sudden, all the hospitals in Texas needed to be trauma centers. So everybody kind of geared up, and we started getting phone calls from around the country. And we decided on Austin. So we went to Austin, Texas. We drilled in a county hospital for a year with our team that we'd brought to do trauma care in that hospital while we finished building Dell Children's. One night moved all of the process over, all the patients and everything, and all the trauma process with us, and then a little over a year later, got it designated as the second pediatric trauma center in the Southwest United States, and had that up and going, and then, fortunately, a few years later, got a phone call from really Sam Smith, the chief in Arkansas. He said, hey, why don't you come back? We just got some legislation passed that allows us to be a trauma center. We got some funding with it, but we need to get designated. Why don't you come back and help us do that? And I said, well, Sam, I'm flattered, but I have that job, and I have that job in Austin, and I don't really want to give that up. So we hung up, and the next call came from the governor's office in Arkansas, and they said, we're going to set up this system. Why don't you come help us build this system? And I said, well, again, thank you. I mean, I'm flattered, but I'm a pediatric surgeon, and I worked really hard to get to do that, and now I'm doing trauma and pediatric surgery, so it seems pretty perfect, and I don't really want to work just at the health department. So it hung up, and then a few weeks later, the third call came from both of them and said, we've worked this out. You can do both. You can work at the hospital. You can work at the health department. Come do it. And so just like sort of Beverly Hillbillies, Amy and I loaded up the truck and, headed back to Arkansas. So again, kind of, as you can see, none of it was planned. Lots of it was just sort of fortuitous and circuitous and lucky. So I guess I tell that a little bit to say kind of where pediatric trauma has come from, and then what our path to that was. One of the really fortunate things is that while we'd been back in Arkansas a couple of years, and I was going to all the trauma meetings, and you went to the trauma meetings, and let me rephrase it. You went to the pediatric surgery meetings, and you felt like a fish out of water. Like, I don't really fit in here. Like, trauma is kind of the antithesis of what most of these men and women want to do with their lives. They actually kind of hate it, and I felt a little like a pariah in those settings. I'd go to the trauma meetings, East, AAST, the College of Surgeons, and felt a little like an oddity, an anomaly there. Oh, well, that's the pediatric guy. Yeah, he does trauma. I mean, he can do it, but he's the pediatric guy. So sort of really no home anywhere, no place. And then we were at an East meeting in 2011, and it's like one of these cartoons where the animals think they're the only one left after the apocalypse, after the meteor is hit, and you're the only animal left of your species. And then you find that there are others. There are others of your species around. There's a few really odd ducks who are pediatric surgeons who like trauma. It was awesome. I mean, it was awesome. I see two of them in the back there. I see Mike Nance and David Booney. I see Dave Meager. I see Bob Letton, Dave Tuggle, who we talked about yesterday. There were not many of them, and they're all in that picture right there. And it was absolutely one of the happiest times of my life to realize that I could have a tribe. I could have a group that's felt the same way I did about it, that it was absolutely a moral imperative that we dedicate ourselves to the number one thing that kills children. So I love this picture. It's a terrible picture. I'm sorry it's so blurry, but the bottom is me sort of holding court and pontificating, and at the top I see Tuggle and Wesson and Deb Brown and Mike, and it was just an incredible time. So where we've come from we were fortunate. We were fortunate to get to train in pediatric surgery. We were fortunate to get to be around people that were trauma people. We were fortunate that they let us in, and then we were incredibly fortunate to find our tribe. And in that time, we said, we've got to dedicate ourselves to this disease. We've got to dedicate ourselves to growing this. Pediatric surgeons need to be in this space. Pediatric providers need to be in this space. Children's hospitals need to be in this space. It's got to be what they do. And everybody left there energized, went back to their part of the country, and started to work. So I'll always be grateful to those people that took that amazing trip with us in 2011. And it worked. It caught hold, and there was a tipping point. There was a point where men and women that were training in pediatric surgery or pediatric emergency medicine or critical care said, we really ought to be doing this. Where the hospital said, we really ought to be doing this. You heard from David that in 2000, when I finished training, there were 17 pediatric trauma centers in the country, and they were all concentrated really on the coasts. Today, there are 77, and there are more in the pipeline. I expect this number to be over 100 in the next couple of years, and that's just a beginning. That's just a good place to start. There are great things happening across the country with surgical verification. Mary Fallett's work in the Pediatric Readiness Project is going to improve pediatric care across the board, not just for trauma, but for pediatric patients across the board in non-pediatric hospitals. It's going to save lives. An incredible statistic, and you heard a little bit of it yesterday from Raul Coimbra, thanking us really for our contribution to the science. In 2001, a little under 400 pediatric trauma papers published in all of the surgical literature. The first 3 months of this year, there were over 3,000 pediatric trauma papers published in the scientific literature. And you heard Raul say that the pediatric surgery papers, the pediatric trauma papers, are what are actually driving the impact factor of the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery. And as you heard Bob say, pediatric providers, emergency medicine, critical care, surgery, have seats at the table today when trauma care in the United States is being discussed. There's somebody at the table that says, let's think about the kids. What about the kids? I was, and this was really due to Ronnie and Eileen Bulger, but became the first pediatric surgeon to be the chair of the Verification Review Committee. Now there's been a second, there'll be more over time, and so we have a seat at all of the right tables. That's where we are today. We're in really, really good shape. But where are we going? That picture is enigmatic of where we're going. Those children on the left have to grow up to be those children on the right. Trauma needs to not be the number one reason that they're taken from their parents until they're 44 years of age. We have to prevent that from happening. If and when it does happen, we have to do a better job of caring for them. We can't be nihilist about their traumatic brain injury. We've got to do better with that. When they get through their treatment for trauma, they have to be healthier from a rehabilitation standpoint, from a social determinants of health standpoint, from a mental health standpoint. They've got to be healthier. We've got to pay attention to that. That's where we have to go. Now, this is terrible to say. I'm hoping it actually doesn't totally happen before I leave my practice. I love trauma. I do live in Arkansas, and so we are not going to see autonomous driving ATVs in Arkansas anytime soon. And AI in Arkansas means alcohol intoxication. And while I espouse to the Mission Zero principles, as long as gravity and testosterone exist, we're probably going to have jobs. But we must address these things, and we must address it from multiple angles, with multiple tactics. One of my heroes in life, David Wesson, really taught me this. He said, Todd, you're going to move a third of the population by just explaining to them, giving them education. You're going to move a third of them. People are going to move toward good habits and less risky behavior if you just educate. A third, you're going to have environmental structural change and legislation if you're going to move things. And then a third of them aren't going to change their behavior no matter what you do. But you can move the needle a lot here. And his famous saying, he kept a note card in his front pocket that said, a saying from his mother that says, it's a great life if you don't weaken. And he would say it all the time, and it was just, I would give anything to have him pat me on the shoulder today and remind me of that. So, we must do prevention work. It's the most cost-effective thing we can possibly do. I know we've talked a lot in here about treatment work, but this is the most cost-effective thing we can do, and we've got to be brave about how we go about it. We've got to speak the truth, call these things out, and act. We've got to do those things. Now, not all injuries can be prevented by injury prevention. There's no injury prevention initiative that's going to keep this first grader from falling on her pencil, right? So when that happens, we have to have systems in place that work for her. Interesting story. Amy and I got to Arkansas, and I walked in one of the first days, and I went to the C-suite. shook hands with the CEO and said, "Hi, I'm Todd. I'm going to help you run the trauma program." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I've heard of you." He said, "We're happy you're here. We don't need you, but we're happy you're here." And I thought, what are you talking about? Like, I'd read the CDC reports. I'd read the College of Surgeon reports. Arkansas was at the bottom of the mortality curve. I mean, it had the highest child mortality in the country. If you were injured in a car wreck in 1990 or in 2007, your chances of dying were 3 times the national average. What the hell are you talking about? You don't need our program. And he said, "Well, our mortality's only 1.5% here." And I thought that it doesn't make sense. I don't understand. I've seen the statistics. It's super high. Preventable mortality was 30+%. What do you mean your mortality is 1.5%? Dug a little deeper. Here it is. In that year where that statistic came from, or in the 5 years actually, 790 kids died in Arkansas of injury. 97 of them, or 12%, made it to the children's hospital. 88% died at the scene or in community hospitals, never getting the benefit of the children's hospital. And so, yeah, that dumbass was right. His mortality was only 1.5% because they were dying all over the rest of the state. So, certainly, doing good work at Arkansas Children's, improving our care there, was going to make a difference. But really what was going to make a difference was making an impact at the system level, at the state level. Getting people there faster, educating the community hospitals, working with the men and women that don't typically do pediatric care in order to get a patient that we might have a chance of salvaging. And I said to him after I sort of discovered this, "Yes, sir, I get it. And I'm going to tell you that our mortality is going to triple over the next 5 years as the overall mortality in the state goes down. That is our mission. That's what we're going to accomplish. And that's absolutely what came to fruition." And I've enjoyed being part of the conversation at a national level where we say, now that Arkansas mortality is acceptable, still's got a lot of room to go, but it's better. It's a lot better. What I don't want to see is Amy and the kids and the grandchildren, and I don't want to see us driving across the country and get to one part of the country where that's still not the case. It's unacceptable to me. This is not a states' right thing. Come on, where you get one level of care here, you get a different level of care when you cross that county or that state line. It's unacceptable, and there should be a national system of trauma care. You heard Ronnie Stewart talk about it, and I would call on everybody in this room to work with their legislators and to advocate for this national system of trauma care. There should be some minimum standards that exist everywhere in this country. We've got to do it. Now, we also have to focus on the care and moving the science forward. And I can't tell you heard David Notrika talk yesterday, and I can't tell you how energized I am. I feel like I saw something transformative this week where the Childress Summit met with the Atomic Group and now the A+ group and began to talk about the priorities for the national trauma system as far as research, discovery. It was amazing. And what gelled through this week was what that partnership looked like. It was unbelievable having those people there. That bottom right picture is an NIH program officer talking about pediatric trauma. Pediatric trauma is funded, as you saw from David yesterday, it's funded at 1/10 of what pediatric cancer care. Pediatric cancer care is important. It kills about 1/3 of the kids that pediatric trauma does, and it's funded 10 times higher than pediatric trauma. And the program officer from the NIH was there, acknowledged it, and was looking for partners to do something about that. I left so encouraged, so energized. And I feel like the forest came into focus. You know, like I'd focused on little pieces of it, care, pre-hospital injury prevention, all these things, but all of a sudden it sort of opened up, and it seems somewhat clear today. It seems a lot more clear than it seemed a week ago to me, where the Childress Institute is going to be an incredible partner with its public-facing initiatives and philanthropy and fundraising and data management. A+ becomes an incredibly powerful tool among trauma centers to do trauma-specific research. PTS has an incredible role in doing some of the research as well, but also being the farm team, also being the incubator, where we develop young people to do trauma-related research, both physicians and non-physicians. And then we partner with organizations that are in those same spaces, like PCORI, East, AAST, and the College of Surgeons. So I think there are 4 big things that speak to the fact that we're going to succeed. We have a collective will to do so. This room is evident of that those symposiums earlier in the week are evident of that collective will to do something big. We have a critical mass of people. Those 31 people that were in that room in 2011 were certainly dedicated, and they were the change agents that brought all of us here today. But now we have a critical mass. We've got men and women, young men and women, that are graduating from pediatric surgery fellowships that want to go do trauma care. They want to do trauma research. We've got surgeons that have critical care training that are now in the ICU doing that work. We're doing amazing things. We've got a critical mass of patients to continue to push this initiative forward. We saw the beginnings of an incredible infrastructure this last week. The coalescence of Childress, Atomic, A+, PCARN, the NIH, and PTS, an amazing force that if managed well, if collaborative, if inclusive, is going to succeed. You are going to be here 10 more years from now at the 20th anniversary, and you're going to see amazing things have happened in pediatric trauma care. I really think so, and I think I enjoyed the session downstairs this morning where men and women in pediatric surgery and pediatric trauma care were starting to talk about how to move these principles out from the United States into the rest of the world, where trauma remains an incredible burden out there. We can do these things. So we have some very, very specific things that we need to focus on, and I thought the A+ Childress Summit highlighted those things for us. We need to focus on the things that are important, that we felt were unattainable in the past. We've sort of been nihilist about traumatic brain injury. I feel like there were proposals that came to the A+ group that are going to effectively address that. I think we're going to see the needle moved. There are rare things, there are controversial things that finally a research network of 30 or so children's hospitals can finally address and give us answers to help us continue to move forward. But in doing that work, we can't do it like we've done it in the past. The outcome measure can't be some biomarker in a test tube. It can't be whether a patient lives or dies. It can't be Glasgow outcome score, whether they go to rehab or home or die. That can't be the almost binary outcome metric. It's got to be, how does that kid look 20 years from now? That's what we have to do, because if we save a life, but they don't get back to school, they don't go to work, they don't have a meaningful relationship with a partner at some point in their life, if they can't do that, we've really not succeeded. And so everything that we do has to be measured against an outcome that is much more forward-looking. It's got to be functional, It's got to look at the social determinants of health. It's got to be developmental, and it's got to be psychological. We've got to be measuring and looking at those things, and that determines whether our interventions and our efforts are successful or not. And then we've got to put the value proposition forward. Everything we do costs money, and I now live mostly in a C-suite. If you want to move administrators, if you want to move your state's Medicaid, then you've got to demonstrate the value proposition to them. You've got to show them where the things that they're going to give you money to do, invest with you to do, have a positive return on investment. They've got to see it. They're not crass. They're not callous. I know they're moved by the humanistic side. You and I are too moved by the humanistic side because we have to sit and look at those moms and dads every day. They've got to be fiscally responsible. They've got to be good stewards of the money. And so we have to demonstrate the value proposition, the cost over outcome proposition for everything that we do. That's got to be built into every analysis that we do in the future. That is where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. Now, I get the privilege of the podium, and I'm going to muse for a moment. And I'm not talking any longer to Dave Meager, Bob Letton, Dave Mooney, Mike Nance. I'm talking to you people that are in residency, that are in fellowships, that are new faculty about this, and I want you to be so enthusiastic. I want you to leave this meeting so jazzed about what you're getting into and where you're going with your life. But I do want you to go in eyes wide open. There's a cost. There has been a cost to living this life. I have just gotten to be, I probably was never going to be the best at surgery at any, just regardless. And maybe this is a juicy rationalization, but the time spent, the effort spent doing this work meant that I wasn't the go-to surgeon in my group. I wasn't the busiest surgeon in my group. I really, other than maybe some trauma stuff, not the best at pediatric surgery. And I had to be comfortable with that what I was doing, I had to give my time and effort and care to, and it came at a little bit of a cost. It certainly came at a cost of time and money. How many hours did we spend working on building a program that in time that was never compensated, time that was never valued in RVUs? It just didn't work that way. And it never will work that way if you want to build something that you're going to love. You just have to say, that's where I want to be. I love it, and I'm going to do whatever is necessary to get there. But I would say that what you will gain from it is unbelievable. Look around this room. We have a tribe. We have a community. We have brothers and sisters that are committed to this. And you just heard. We've known each other so long, and that introduction was so special to me. And those are the kind of people that I've gotten to be around because of this work. So you get to be in this community, and it's amazing. You're going to get to discover things. You're going to see things happen over the next decade that really move the needle, and you're going to be proud of your involvement in it. You're going to say, I had a small hand in that. I had a small hand in trauma system development, in trauma center development, in the research and discovery of trauma treatment. I had a small hand in that, and I'm proud of it. And you really can, it's not hyperbolic. You will look up in 10, 15, 20 years, and you'll feel like you had a piece in changing the world. That's a pretty cool feeling. And if you're unbelievably lucky, you'll get to work with people like this. You'll get to force multiply what you're doing. My work will be done someday. My contribution will be done someday. And it's finite if it's only me, if it's only about me. But if it's about giving this to these young men and women, and they're going to go out into their community and do it and teach it and pass it on to other young men and women, then it lives. What I've done, what I've given, lives on. Incredibly, incredibly lucky. So, is it worth it? Absolutely. Absolutely has been worth it. Absolutely has been worth it. I feel better about those kids on the left and their ability to be healthy young men and women on the right. And I hope you will enjoy this as much as I have. I have some thank yous. I thank this membership for this opportunity to serve as your president for a short period of time and to shepherd this process along. I want to thank very specifically Johanna and Katie, who work to help Pediatric Trauma Society stay on track. They really do all the heavy lifting there, and they make it possible, make it easy. Thank you to Lisa and Patricia as our past president, our future president, and the rest of the PTS board for their dedication to this. Thank you. Thank you all.
Few minutes, correct? Todd, that was awesome. If there's somebody that walks out of this room not energized to go do good things, then I can't say it. Anyway. Not a big tradition to ask questions after the presidential address, but we have a few minutes and an amazing mind at the podium if he doesn't well up anymore in tears like I did. Any comments, thoughts, questions, Todd?
No, again, I just, I could not have imagined in 2011, I couldn't have imagined the magnitude of this. I guess I did believe in 2011 that you and Dave Wesson and Deb Brown, Mike Nance, David Mooney, that we were going to be here. I thought we would be here. I thought there would be a tipping point that this would catch. And I've enjoyed seeing the hospitals identify trauma care as something that they desire, something that was beneficial to them. And again, I don't mean to be totally cynical, but they finally saw it from both a financial standpoint and they saw it from a competitive standpoint, that if one was doing it, they could not do it. And we used some of the same tactics in the state of Arkansas to get Arkansas to do things. You know, we just said, well, even Louisiana's doing it. Mississippi does it. And that just totally eggs them on to do that. So we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. I am thrilled about the development of a national trauma system that gives some consistency to this across the country, and I'm thrilled about the discovery that's going to happen. I'm not smart enough to do it. but there are young men and women in this room. I see Regan Williams in the back, and she's smart enough to do it, and it's going to be successful at it. And so it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So again, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be a small part of it. So again, thank you guys.